Chapter 11, Speaking with Confidence. So as a speech teacher through the years, I've known that this is not everyone's favorite course. In fact, for many, I've found that I get a lot of students that say, well, I put it off. This is the very end of my last year, but I'm finally making myself do it. I also have had multiple students through the years that I've seen several times in my class because they start and they're really going well, and then it's time to give a speech and they just quit. And a lot of it is because of lack of confidence and because of communication anxiety. So I do want you to know that that's something that you're not alone with. If that's something you suffer from, communication apprehension or anxiety is the fear of public speaking. Research indicates that 20% or more of the U.S. population has a high degree of communication apprehensions. People with high levels of CA have demonstrated that they will avoid communicative interactions in personal and professional relationships, social situations, and classrooms. And effective public speaking is not simply about learning what to say, but about developing the confidence to say it. So as we continue, we'll talk a little bit about specifics and then maybe some things that you can do to help overcome it. So trait anxiety is a type of anxiety that is aligned with an individual's personality. So if you consider yourself an anxious person in general, people that refer to themselves as shy, if you're anxious in general, then the odds are public speaking will make you anxious. State anxiety is fear associated with scrutiny and negative evaluation. It's related sometimes to negative experience in public at an early age that results in public embarrassment. So state anxiety has some sort of basis in our fear of being evaluated negatively, and that can be because it's happened to us before. Scrutiny fear is very similar, I think. It stems from an activity that doesn't necessarily involve interacting with other people, but rather simply is the fear of being in a situation where one is being watched or observed, or one perceives him or herself as being watched while undertaking an activity. So for some people in state, it's that they're concerned about what people are thinking about them. For others, it is just a simple act on scrutiny that they don't want to be the center of attention. They don't want to be the one thing that people are focused on and watching. It's interesting to me that a lot of teachers have communication apprehension, so they're comfortable in a classroom teaching, but they're not comfortable giving a speech. I remember working with a teacher at one point that we just asked her to stand on stage and hand out an award, and she refused to do that. I mean, it was too much, but she'll stand in classrooms with 25, and she handles that fine in teaching lessons. So it's kind of interesting to me how sometimes it's applied. CA is known as a result condition. Those who are dealing with the challenge will recognize the different intensities associated with different situations or triggers. So it may not be every situation you have anxiety, it just may be some. Cognitive restructuring and careful deliberate experience can help scrutiny fear and state anxiety. So frames of reference: the context, the viewpoint, or a set of presuppositions or evaluative criteria within which a person's perception and thinking seem always to occur, and which constitute selectively the course and outcomes of these activities. The possibility of negative experience can lead to many students to skip assignments or drop a class, which is what I've had many times. So it's just the possibility that it could be negative. I can tell you in 19 years of teaching at the college level, I've never had a student just lose it or just blow it in the middle of a speech. I've never had a student that had to stop and gather themselves because they couldn't get words out. I've never had a student faint, and I've never had a student get sick. I've never had that situation, but I've had many students that felt that that's what's going to happen to them. I've had many students that visualized themselves doing all of those things when it was time to give a speech. So cognitive restructuring is an internal process through which the individual can deliberately adjust how they perceive an action or an experience. So you address the feelings of being center of attention, you address the feeling that the audience is just waiting for you to make a mistake, and you learn that confidence is vital to delivering a public presentation. So techniques for building confidence. Preparation. I think the most important thing for a student that is anxious about giving the speech is to prepare. The more you prepare ahead of time, and I know that's challenging in some of our shorter terms, the more you prepare ahead of time, the more comfortable you're going to be with the content. The problem typically lies that those that do not want to give the speech are the procrastinators. So the more you dread giving the speech, the more you put off the development process and the practice process. So you're building your anxiety and making it worse and worse and worse because you're waiting last minute, and then you're not confident in what you're saying. The best, most consistent, and direct way to minimize the level of nervousness you feel is through effective preparation. Go beyond knowing what you're going to talk about to knowing what you're going to say. When you practice, visualize success. When you practice, don't think of all the bad things that can happen, because the odds are those aren't going to happen. Think about the success that can be at the end. Avoid gimmicks and false tips about practicing for a speech. I've seen many times teachers will say, look at the back of the classroom, look at the back of the wall, and then you won't be distracted by people. But you'll look like you're looking at the back of the wall. It's clear when you're not looking at your audience. It's clear when you're not focusing on them. It's clear when you're doing things that are trying to work around doing what you're supposed to do. So just kind of avoid those gimmicky things. Breathe and release is a type of presentation exercise that might be helpful, and it's based on a therapeutic idea called systematic desensitization, which is a multi-stage regimen to help patients deal with phobias through coping mechanisms. So breathe and release is a way to desensitize you to the negative experience that you're foreseeing. It's a shortcut relaxation technique that can be useful for nervous speakers, especially those with physical manifestations of nervousness, such as shaky hands or knees. So your book goes through a little bit more of the process, but involves 3 steps. Imagine the nervousness within your body, and then draw that energy that you're feeling to a high point within your body with deep cleansing breaths. So essentially, you're imagining it as bubbling inside of you, like liquid. And then when you're drawing the energy to a high point, it's like picturing it to boil over and boil out. So your goal is to picture that nervous energy and just kind of release it outside of you. Release the energy by deliberately relaxing the entirety of your upper extremities. Imagine how keeping any part of your upper extremities tense would result in a kink in the release valve, and it wouldn't release it. And so complete relaxation is the key to success. Breathe and release is something that can be done even as one walks to the front of the classroom or boardroom to begin to speak. I would say, lastly, it is important to have a good idea of how you manifest your anxiety. Many of us have physiological signs that we are nervous and we are anxious. So it's always a good idea of being aware of what those things are for you. For some of us, if you speak faster. So if you know that if you're nervous, you're going to talk a lot faster, then make sure when you practice your speech, you plan for that with your time. And then consciously work on slowing yourself down. Others of us get hot in the room. So even if it's December and you're going to give a speech somewhere and you get hot when you get nervous, don't dress for the weather outside. Wear layers so that you can be comfortable in the room. Some people I've had, when I was a debate coach, I had many students that broke out in hives up on their neck. And then they got really conscious about the fact that they could tell that they had broken out in hives. So if that's something that happens to you, kind of make sure to work where you can hide that if that's something you're insecure about. Other times, I think some people get really bad headaches if they're nervous and anxious. So just make sure that you take care of yourself, hydrate well that day, eat well. Don't not eat because you're anxious, but also be thoughtful about what you do eat so that you don't upset your stomach or kind of exacerbate issues that may be going on with anxiety and nerves. It's just important to have a good idea of how you manifest the physiological responses to anxiety, and so that way you can kind of figure out the best way to release those things.